I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Togo.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished President of the General Assembly, distinguished UN Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I should like to congratulate His Excellency Mr. Volkan Bozkır on his outstanding election to preside over the 75th Regular General Assembly. I also acknowledge the outstanding work done by the outgoing President, His Excellency Mr. Tijani Mohamed Bande, who, through his leadership and wisdom in these difficult times, has set his stone in the great building site of our organization. I should also like to renew to the Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Gutierrez, our trust in him, and we extend to him a heartfelt tribute for the skill with which he has implemented our common goals. Mr. President, when 2020 comes to an end, it will undoubtedly go down in history as one of the most difficult because of the public health crisis linked to COVID-19. This illness has spread worldwide and has caused untold human suffering. It has exposed the numerous unsuspected weaknesses of the international community and provoked an unprecedented economic crisis. As we meet in this assembly, we still have not found a lasting cure for this illness. I wish to pay tribute to the memory of all of the victims of this virus and acknowledge the outstanding work of all healthcare workers from all countries who have saved thousands of human lives. Mr. President, this session is taking place in a rather unique context where our world is navigating particularly troubled waters. The human tragedy in its wake has harshly put to test multilateralism and challenged our determination to work together to counter this scourge. And that is why I welcome the theme selected for this General Assembly session entitled The Future We Want, the UN We Need, reaffirming our collective commitment to multilateralism, tackling COVID-19 through genuine multilateral action. In many respects, this theme reveals our collective anxiety. It calls on us to be more united and more determined. In point of fact, the COVID-19 pandemic calls for enormous sacrifice, and our success in curbing this crisis will depend on our will to join our efforts and to reverse the trend of this pandemic as we keep our populations from falling back into extreme poverty. It is regrettable to note that the COVID-19 pandemic has slowed our efforts in a number of areas under the SDGs, particularly health, hunger, and decent work. It is therefore undeniable that the international community must act together globally, consistently, to find a fitting response to this pandemic. And here I would welcome the initiative of the Secretary General, who at the outset of the pandemic launched a system-wide UN response to tackle this pandemic and called upon states to build resilience in order to counter harmful consequences of the pandemic. It has been well established that given the very contagious nature of the pandemic, preventive measures as we are applying them today will in and of themselves not be sufficient to reverse the trend and eliminate the virus. The vaccine remains the lasting cure for this virus. My country therefore encourages all research throughout the world aimed at finding a vaccine. While research seems promising, we also face the issue of access to future vaccines. While it is true that the pharmaceutical companies are mobilizing enormous resources to this end, we must not sacrifice our humanity for economic profit, and therefore we must ensure that access to future vaccines against COVID-19 are fair, affordable, and are not subject to market laws. I welcome the adoption of the relevant resolution by the 73rd General Assembly of the World Health Organization, in which member states determined that all access to this vaccine and any other related medication would be provided for everyone quickly, fairly, and would be safe and affordable. My country also welcomes the COVAX initiative launched by the WHO, which is a mechanism for pooled procurement coordinated through the Gavi Alliance for anti-COVID-19 vaccines, and which will guarantee to each participating country fair and equitable access to these vaccines through an equitable distribution framework which the World Health Organization will set up. Mr. President, the African continent has been hard hit by poverty and natural endemic and cyclical scourges, and we have also seen a disturbing spread of the COVID-19 illness. In order to address this situation, the African Union has set up a strategy to combat and prevent the illness, as recommended by the African Center for Disease Control and Prevention, and this to the tune of more than $200 billion. It has also set up an Africa Medical Supplies platform aimed at mobilizing necessary products and material to combat COVID-19. The access to this material is increasingly difficult due to strong market demand. I therefore welcome the partnership between the UN and the AU to meet this challenge. My country believes that the Secretary General's appeal to the leaders of the G20 to adopt a recovery plan for developing countries, as well as establishing debt moratoria and cancelling debt, should prove helpful. My country, Togo, in our response to COVID-19, has set up a committee which I personally preside. We have a National Coordination Committee, a Management Committee, and a Scientific Committee. And we have done so since the very first person fell ill on the 6th of March 2020. Aware of the socioeconomic impact in the long term of this illness, the government of Togo has also launched a national fund for solidarity and economic recovery to the tune of some 400 billion CFA francs, some $665 million. In terms of actions that we have taken to help prevent the spread of the illness, we have stay-in-place orders, we have screening, mandatory wearing of the mask, and we are educating the population and raising awareness. The government of Togo has also closed certain areas of the country. We've set up curfews and closed borders, as well as schools, universities, and banned public gatherings. In terms of patient care, the government has opened dedicated centers in Lome and each of the economic regions of the country. We have trained staff and we have acquired important equipment for resuscitation, as well as PPE. A therapeutic protocol has been set up by the Scientific Committee as well. A number of social measures have been taken for the population, in particular the most vulnerable, to mitigate the impact of the pandemic. These measures include reducing the cost of water and electricity, lifting taxes on essential products, and distributing food to the neediest people, as well as cash under a program called Novisi, and support for businesses. I extend my sincere thanks to all of our partners who've provided assistance to Togo at this time. Mr. President, in this commemorative year, the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, it is worthwhile mentioning that our institution has accomplished enormous achievements in the area of peace building, ensuring respect for human rights, and promoting sustainable development despite the challenges it has faced. One of the major achievements of our organization involves promoting peace and security, where peacekeeping operations have contributed to saving lives and promoted the restoration of stability and safety in a world subject to conflicts and new threats such as terrorism and violent extremism. These peacekeeping operations, to which my country has participated as primary troop contributors, have been refined and improved over time. I welcome the fact that they are working towards prevention and have taken on a multidimensional approach. In the area of development, the adoption in 2015 of the Sustainable Development Agenda by 2030 today is one of the most ambitious tools we have guaranteeing the well-being of our peoples. This program has benefited from the experience garnered in developing the Millennium Development Goals, and it has a cross-cutting approach in the three sectors of sustainable development, namely the economic, social, and environmental spheres. Our organization has also promoted human rights, particularly for women and children. These international human rights norms have spread to a number of areas. Mr. President, despite successes here and there, we cannot hide from the fact that our organization is still facing a number of challenges. International cooperation alone and global solidarity can alone help us be successful. In point of fact, we have not yet been successful in warding off the specter of war and armed conflicts of all kinds. These conflicts have taken on a new dimension in our time because they are fueled now by non-state actors and by nebulous networks which fuel terrorism and religious proselytizing, particularly in some countries of the Sahel region and Central Africa. Moreover, climate change, in particular adverse weather conditions we've seen in Africa, migratory crises as well, are challenges to which our organization must provide bold and lasting responses if it hopes to achieve the ideals which led to its creation. The expectations of our people are great and they are urgent, and my country calls for accountability and responsibility on the part of states to commit again to actions which will help revitalize and reform our organization, its main organs, particularly the Security Council, to make it more representative and adapt it to the demands of our time. We firmly believe that greater transparency, justice, equity, and democracy, strict respect for sovereign equality of states, and dignity of everyone, particularly with regard to the African continent, will enable our organization to write new pages in its history, and we must therefore not give in to the temptation to turn inward as nations. Let us work together in meeting the expectations of peace and development of our peoples. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Togo for his statement. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the United